They watched you bleed, not just watched. They smiled. They saw your silence and thought it meant surrender. They looked at your stillness and whispered weakness. But they never asked why you were quiet, did they? You remember it, don't you? That moment when everything cracked and someone you trusted turned their back. Not with a loud bang, not with drama, but with cold, casual betrayal. Like your loyalty meant nothing, like your pain was invisible. You walked home that day and didn't say a word, not because you couldn't, because you knew no one would listen. Because deep down, you understood something they didn't. Silence is survival. You felt the weight in your chest, not anger, not yet. Just that heavy, hollow ache. The kind of pain that makes the world quieter. The kind that turns noise into static and people into shadows. They called you soft, too sensitive, too emotional, too much. So you gave them what they wanted. Nothing. No response. No fight. No explanation. But inside the storm began. You started noticing things. How people only love you when you're useful. How they disappear the second you need them. How your pain makes them uncomfortable. So they label you dramatic and move on with their small, empty lives. You sat with it. You sat with the betrayal, the abandonment, the rejection. Alone. You watched them go out, post their smiles, laugh with your enemies, like you never mattered, like you never existed. And the worst part, you said nothing. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you knew there was no point in screaming at people who sleep peacefully after hurting you. So you stayed quiet, but not dead. Never dead. Because silence is a seed, and pain is water. You buried yourself deep in that dirt, and they thought it was a grave. But it was a garden, and now you're growing, alone, unseen, unbothered. They called it weakness. You were just healing. They laughed at your stillness. You were just waiting. They mocked your quiet. You were just planning. They think you're still there, still broken, still soft. But the version of you they betrayed doesn't live here anymore. You buried that version, right beside the trust they destroyed. Now all that's left is something they don't recognize, something they should be afraid of. Because the quiet ones are always the ones who burn last, and burn longer. You didn't scream, but they will. Silence is a strange thing. Most people don't understand it. They think if you're quiet, you're weak. That if you don't fight back, you've accepted defeat. That if you walk away, it's because you're afraid. But you know better now, don't you? You learned that silence isn't weakness, it's warning. A scream is loud, but it fades. A punch lands hard, but it heals. But silence? Silence echoes. Silence haunts. Silence lingers long after the moment is gone. Because silence means you're watching, calculating, remembering. You don't speak because you don't need to. You don't fight because the war is already won. Inside, they thought they broke you, but they didn't see what was happening in the dark. In that silence, you were rebuilding, bit by bit, piece by shattered piece. Not the same as before. Stronger, sharper, colder. Silence gave you time. Time to see who was real. Time to learn how the world really works. Time to grow your armor. And now, you don't flinch. You don't beg. You don't explain yourself. Because silence taught you how to hold your power. To stop giving it away just to feel seen. To stop proving yourself to people who are blind on purpose. You became the mirror. The one they can't look into without seeing what they did. Without seeing who they really are. And mirrors don't talk. They just reflect. You became the reflection of their guilt, their betrayal, their shame. They look at you now, and all they see is the storm they started, quietly gathering. Because silence isn't weakness, it's control. You're not reacting because they don't matter anymore. You're not replying because their words are beneath you. You're not chasing because what you carry inside now is something they could never break again. Silence is patience. Silence is power. Silence is the sound of someone who doesn't need anyone's permission to become dangerous. And isn't that what you've become? A little colder, a little wiser, a little more distant. Not because you're empty, but because you're full. Full of understanding, full of clarity, full of the kind of pain that turns soft things into steel. They thought they left you behind, but you were never behind. You were beneath, deep under the surface, building in shadows. And the beautiful part, they never saw it coming. They never saw what silence was doing to you. They never saw the rage you turned into fuel. They never saw the soul you were sharpening in the dark. Because silence is transformation. It's the cocoon before the wings. It's the night before the fire. It's the breath before the storm. And now you walk different, talk different, think different. You don't give explanations. You don't give warnings. You don't even give closure. Because silence taught you. You don't owe anyone anything. Not your voice, not your tears, not your pain. They don't deserve the new version of you. The one who doesn't break. The one who doesn't kneel. The one who doesn't need to be understood. You're done being the one who hurts quietly in the corner. Now your silence is the corner they fear, the edge they can't look over. Because they know what's waiting there. Not words, not forgiveness, not hope. Just the cold realization that they lost something they will never get back. You, not the old you, the one who smiled too much. Gave too much, believed too much. That version of you, gone. And in its place stands something new, something unshakable, something they can't reach, no matter how loud they scream. They'll knock, they'll beg, they'll plead for the version they used to manipulate. But the silence will answer them, because now, you're the one who chooses who gets access. And most of them, they won't even get your shadow. They thought you were silent because you were scared. They never realized you were sharpening your soul. You remember the day, don't you? Not the date, not the time. Just the feeling, like something inside you snapped, without a sound. It didn't start with a scream. There was no big fight, no dramatic ending. Just a quiet moment where you looked at someone you trusted and realized they weren't who you thought they were. Maybe it was a message you weren't supposed to see. Maybe it was how they laughed with the very people who hurt you. Maybe it was when they looked at your pain and shrugged. Or worse, smiled. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to make your stomach drop. Enough to make your hands shake, just a little. Enough to make something in your chest go numb. And in that moment, you didn't get angry. You didn't lash out. You didn't beg for an explanation. You just stood there, frozen in a silence that felt heavier than rage. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was a realization, a shift. The kind of moment where the world moves a little to the left and never goes back. You had spent so long trying to be good, trying to be kind, trying to be loyal, understanding, patient. You bent until your spine cracked for people who wouldn't even lean. You gave pieces of yourself like gifts to people who never said thank you. You thought that if you just loved harder, stayed longer, held on tighter, they'd finally see your worth. But they didn't. And they never planned to. Because some people don't want to see you. They just want to use you. And the second you stop being useful, they drop you like you never mattered. That's what happened, isn't it? You saw their true face. Not the one they showed you when they needed something, but the one they wore when they thought you weren't looking. And it broke something in you. Not in a way that made you fall apart. No, it was different. It wasn't chaos. It was clarity. A sudden silence in your mind. A stillness. Like your heart finally stopped begging for love it would never receive. It was the moment you realized the war wasn't outside. It was inside. And now you were choosing sides. No more pretending. No more hoping. No more bleeding for people who cut you and call it an accident. That day wasn't your destruction. It was your awakening. You started to see the world for what it is. Not kind, not fair, but raw, brutal, honest. And in that rawness, you found truth. You stopped asking, why would they do this to me? And started whispering, of course they did. Because the truth is, kindness scares the cruel. Loyalty embarrasses the disloyal. And love, real love, exposes the emptiness in people who can't feel anything. You were the mirror, and they hated what they saw in it. So they cracked you, not because you were weak, but because you made them feel small. And now that pain, it's not just pain anymore, it's fire. It burns behind your eyes. It fuels every step you take. It whispers in the back of your mind when you're too tired to keep going. It's not rage, it's purpose. It's not revenge, it's rebirth. Because pain doesn't have to destroy. Sometimes it purifies. Silence. Silence is what cools that fire into steel. You didn't become colder by accident. You forged it. You molded it. You earned it. Now your silence is armor. Your pain is strategy. Your calm is lethal. People look at you and think you've changed. They're right. But what they'll never understand is that this version of you, the one who doesn't call, doesn't chase, doesn't explain, this is who you always were. They just never deserved to see it. You remember the betrayal, sure. You carry it in your chest like a scar with no blood. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It just reminds you that no one's coming to save you. No one's going to protect your heart but you. no one's going to choose you when it matters, unless you choose yourself first. So that day something changed. Not the world, not them, you. You became someone who doesn't beg, doesn't cry in front of people who only watch, doesn't explain their pain to those who use it as gossip. You became the ghost of who they hurt, but stronger, colder, smarter. You walk lighter now, but your footsteps are heavier. Because every step is backed by everything you survived, everything they thought would break you. And now, you don't speak much. You don't trust quickly. You don't offer your heart like it's free. Because it's not. It costs something now. And most people can't afford it. You didn't cry that day. You just stopped needing anyone. Pain didn't end you. It changed you. It wasn't the death they expected. It was the rebirth they never saw coming. You didn't fall apart, you fell inward. Into silence, into shadows, into yourself. And in that darkness, you didn't find comfort. You found truth. The kind that cuts deeper than any lie. The kind that hurts, but heals right. Because pain doesn't just break you, it sculpts you, carves you down to your core, until there's nothing left but the raw material of what you can become. They thought you were done. They thought you were stuck. They thought you were defeated. But that's because they only looked at the surface. They never saw the work happening beneath it. Like roots pushing through stone, you grew. Slow, silent, unstoppable. Your scars became your map. Your solitude became your sanctuary. Your silence became your sharpening. Every sleepless night was training. Every unanswered message was a lesson. Every moment of rejection was a rep in your transformation. They took everything from you, and all they gave you back was space. Space to become dangerous. You stopped talking and started studying their patterns, their motives, their weaknesses. You started learning what no one ever taught you. How to protect your soul without closing it. How to stay soft without being stupid. How to smile like a weapon, not a wound. You studied yourself like a soldier studies war. Mind, body, soul. You began to understand that being the victim was never your final role. It was just the first act, the setup, the spark. You weren't born to break. You were born to burn. And now, you are the quiet storm. You don't scream. You don't threaten. You don't announce your return. You move like wind through the trees, soft, calm, until the branches start snapping. You became the wolf, not the loud one that chases everything that moves, but the silent one, the one with eyes like ice, the one that waits, watches, strikes once, and ends it. Because you don't need attention, you need results. And those never come with noise. They come with precision, patience, power. You stopped performing pain for people who applauded your downfall. You stopped trying to be understood by minds too shallow to hold depth. You stopped begging to be heard in rooms built to silence you. Instead, you built yourself in places no one could reach. You lifted in the dark. You read in the quiet. You healed without witnesses. And that's why they're not ready. Because what you've become Can't be measured, can't be predicted, can't be controlled. You've become something different now. Not the broken mirror, not the bleeding heart, not the forgotten soul. Your steel, your silence, your storm. They'll look at you and wonder what happened. They'll say you changed, that you got cold, that you're distant. But you're not cold. You're focused. You're not distant. You're unavailable to the people who earned your silence. Don't owe them the old version of you. The one they walked over. The one they ignored. The one who loved loudly and lost quietly. That version of you died the day you realized you were never coming back. What's left now is elemental, like wind, like thunder, like lightning striking the same place twice just to make sure it's destroyed. You don't explain yourself anymore. You don't lower your voice to comfort the weak. You don't show your wounds to people who fed the knife. You just move. And when you do, the air shifts, the room tenses, the silence thickens. Because they feel it, even if they don't understand it. They feel that something's coming. Not with noise, not with warning, but with weight, presence, pressure, a reckoning. You've become the quiet storm. And a storm doesn't make announcements. It just arrives and wrecks everything. They laughed. Of course they did. They always laugh when they think you're done. When you fall, when you disappear, when you go quiet. They called it failure. They called it weakness. They thought silence meant you'd given up. But what they never understood was that you weren't finished. You were just beginning. They didn't see what was happening behind the silence, behind the tired eyes, behind the shut doors. They only saw the surface. They never looked underneath. Because if they had, they'd have seen the roots. The slow, patient, powerful roots growing deep into the earth. While they reached for attention, you reached for foundation. While they posed for approval, you were building in the dirt where no one claps. They laughed at your stillness. But real power doesn't sprint. It grows slow, in shadows, in solitude. They mocked your isolation, but didn't realize what isolation really is. It's a forge. It's a place where the world can't reach you, where their noise doesn't matter, where your only company is discipline and time. And time is the sharpest blade of all. Because while they were out trying to be seen, you were becoming someone they wouldn't recognize. You were building your mind, feeding it with truth, with strategy, with the kind of knowledge they can't even spell. You were building your body, pushing through the pain, training while they slept, transforming every weakness into strength they'd never believe. You were building your soul, finding out who you are when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, when no one believes in you but you. They laughed because they didn't see it. They laughed because it made them feel bigger. Because deep down, they knew they couldn't do what you were doing. They needed validation. You needed silence. They needed applause. You needed pain. And that's what separates you. Because the greatest things are never born in the spotlight. They're born in quiet rooms, in cold mornings, in broken moments where nobody's watching, and you still choose to rise. You didn't show them your progress. You didn't post your struggle. You didn't explain your dreams to people who only speak in limits. You just worked, day after day, cutting away excuses, sharpening your will, letting the laughter echo in your memory, not to haunt you, but to fuel you. Because you remember what they said. You remember how they smiled at your silence, not knowing it was the sound of something dangerous forming. And now, you walk into rooms and they don't recognize you, but they feel something, a shift, an unease, silence that stings. Because the energy has changed. You're not here to be liked. You're not here to explain where you've been. You're not here to prove anything. You are the proof. They don't get to know the hours you spent in the dark. They don't get to see the tears that fell when no one cared. They don't get access to the blueprint you bled over. All they get now is the result. The version of you that was born from the ashes of their laughter. And you keep moving. You keep building. Not out of spite, but out of purpose. Because you're not done. You don't need noise to become unstoppable. They gave you the greatest gift they didn't mean to. Doubt. And you turned that doubt into discipline. You turned their mockery into momentum. You turned their noise into silence, so you could finally hear your own voice. They laughed, and they'll keep laughing, until the moment their smile fades into confusion. Until they realize the quiet one didn't disappear. They evolved. By the time they see it, it'll be too late. Because while they were laughing, you were loading the bullet. Pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Software, cold, precise. The kind of whisper that stays with you. Long after the voices fade. Long after the damage is done. You didn't want revenge. Not at first. All you wanted was peace. Closure. Maybe even an apology. But when you realized it would never come, something inside you changed. You stopped looking outward and turned everything inward. All that pain, you held it, studied it, fed it, until it wasn't pain anymore. It was purpose. You no longer needed to be understood. You didn't want to be heard. You wanted to become something. Something they couldn't touch. Something they couldn't destroy. Because silence is a weapon. It doesn't just punish the guilty. It poisons them slowly. With thoughts, with questions, with the absence of forgiveness. They think they won when you don't respond. They think they're safe when you disappear. But that's just the beginning of the storm. Because silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening, where they can't see it. You learned how to move without noise, how to become invisible, till it's time to be seen. Not for validation, not for approval, but for impact. They thought it was over, but it was only ever quiet. Let me tell you a story. There was a man once, locked away in a cell for years. No visitors, no windows, no name. They said he was forgotten, dead even. The world went on, and he stayed behind. But in that cell, he didn't rot. He trained. He didn't speak. He listened to the silence, to the sound of his own thoughts, to the slow rhythm of time molding him into something else. He counted every second, every crack in the wall, every breath like a blade, cutting deeper into his old self. And One day the door opened. They expected to find a broken man. What walked out was a ghost in flesh. Calm, quiet, smiling. Because what they forgot was this: the most dangerous man is the one who waits. And you are that man now. Or at least, what he represents. You were buried, forgotten, ignored. But all they did was give you space, time, silence. They gave you the cold room where warriors are born. They gave you the solitude where killers are crafted. Not of blood, but of energy, of focus, of silence that cuts. You stopped needing revenge to be loud. Now you want it quiet. You want them to suffer the way you did. Not through chaos, but through reflection. Through the slow burn of regret. Because regret isn't fire, it's ice. It freezes moments in their mind. The things they said, the things they didn't do. The moment they walked away thinking you'd never rise again. They'll feel it when they see you. Changed, unreachable, unmoved. They'll feel it when they realize you're not angry. You're done. Done explaining. Done proving. Done hoping they'd be better. And that feeling, that quiet grief that comes from knowing you ruined something permanent, that's the real punishment. They won't get closure. They won't get forgiveness. They won't get a second chance. They'll just sit in their own mind, playing memories like broken records, wishing they had said something different, done something different, treated you like you mattered. But the silence won't answer. You won't answer. Because now your existence is enough. Your presence is the revenge. Your peace is the punishment. You are no longer screaming. You are simply becoming. And they are remembering, regretting, fading. You didn't destroy them. They did that to themselves. The moment they thought you were too weak to rise, they forgot you were still breathing. That was their mistake. You don't react anymore. Not because you don't feel, but because you felt too much. So much that the wires inside you burned out. Now all that's left is stillness. Cold, heavy, unshakable. They pushed you to that place. And now they'll meet the version of you they didn't prepare for. The one that doesn't chase, doesn't cry, doesn't explain. You've stopped playing the games, stopped answering to guilt trips, stopped caring about how your silence makes them feel. Because the old you, the emotional one, they fed on that version. They knew how to pull the strings. They knew which words made you run back, which wounds to poke to make you bleed for them again. But that version is gone now. Now you move different. You speak less. You watch more. You calculate, like a surgeon with a blade. No wasted motion. No wasted energy. You're not about noise anymore. You're about outcomes. You don't tell people what they did wrong. You just let them drown in the consequences. You don't argue. You exit. You don't threaten. You disappear. Because silence is cleaner than revenge. And more permanent. It won't get a warning. They'll just feel the shift. Suddenly, you're not available. Not open. Not interested. They won't understand it at first. They'll think you're cold. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. You've changed into something they never thought you could be. Unreachable. Now you move with clarity. You don't look back. You don't ask what could have been. You don't wonder if they're sorry. You don't care. Not because you're heartless, but because you finally started protecting your heart. You've seen too much, felt too much, given too much. And the return was silence. So now, that's all they get. You don't need revenge anymore. You've outgrown it. It's not dramatic enough for you. Not effective enough. Because true power doesn't come from making noise. It comes from becoming the thing they can't touch, can't read, can't break. Now you are like the wolf. Not the one that howls to show its pain, but the one that watches from the ridge, waiting, watching, deciding. No movement is wasted. No action is for show. And when you strike, it's final. Wolves don't bark, they bite, and they only bite once. That's who you are now. Not heartless, just precise. You don't love blindly. You don't forgive quickly. You don't give people second chances when they shattered the first with bare hands. You don't let your guard down just because they say the right words. Words don't move you anymore. Patterns do. Action does. Silence does. You're no longer interested in being understood. You've made peace with being misunderstood. Because anyone who really wanted to understand you would have listened when you were still speaking. Now they only hear silence. Now they only feel distance. Now they only get locked doors and empty spaces where your warmth used to be. You don't chase anyone anymore. If they leave, let them. If they lie, let them. If they lose you, good. Because now, you lose nothing when they walk. You gain peace. You gain clarity. You gain space to grow. You're not afraid of alone anymore. You've made a home in your own presence. You've built strength in your own shadow. Now your energy is sacred. And not everyone gets access. Not because you're cruel, but because you finally understand your worth. They'll try to come back. Of course they will. People always return to the places they burned. Once they realized the fire didn't die, it just learned how to control itself. But they won't find the open door. They won't find the version of you waiting with tears and questions. They'll find a locked gate and silence where your name used to live. And that silence, it will be louder than anything you ever said. You won't need to raise your voice. You won't need to explain your reasons. You won't need to defend your distance. Because your absence will do it for you. Your stillness will speak. Your peace will haunt. They'll sit with it. They'll try to rewind the clock. They'll try to remember the last time you smiled at them and realize it's gone. All of it. Because you don't go back. Not anymore. Now you move like consequence, like gravity, like fate. They won't hear the warning, just the door closing behind them. Now they're the ones sitting in silence, and it's louder than anything they've ever heard. They scroll through old messages, replay conversations in their head, try to trace the exact moment you vanished. There was no explosion, no warning shot. You didn't leave in rage, you left in absence. And that's what's breaking them. Because silence has a way of showing people who they really are. Not in the noise, but in the echoes that don't answer back. They stare at themselves now, in the mirror you used to be. The one that once reflected love, loyalty, warmth. Now all they see is the wreckage, the reflection of everything they did when they thought you'd never leave. Regret doesn't need chains. It doesn't need cells. It builds a prison in the mind and locks the door from the inside. You gave them everything. Time, patience, forgiveness. You gave them a chance they never earned. They spit on it, mocked it, took it for granted. And now they want it back. But the silence won't answer. You won't answer. And that emptiness, it eats at them. They reach for you, but grab only shadows. They call your name, but only memory replies. You've become a ghost, not the kind that haunts with noise, but with absence. And absence hurts more than presence ever could. Because presence gives hope. Absence gives truth. The truth that they ruin something sacred. The truth that you don't miss them. The truth that they are the reason for the silence. Let me tell you something else. There's a person standing at the edge of a cliff, yelling into a void, begging the echo to sound like forgiveness. The void stays still. The air stays cold. The only voice they hear is their own. That's what they're doing now. Talking to ghosts, writing apologies no one reads, replaying your laugh like a funeral song. You don't have to say a word, because their mind is doing it for you. They see you in every quiet moment, hear you in the silence between songs, feel you in the places they swore they'd never miss. And they wonder, what if they'd stayed? What if they'd listened? What if they hadn't been so damn selfish? What if is a game for the broken. And they're playing alone now. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're gone. That's what breaks them. Not the shouting, not the arguments, not even revenge, but the silence, the complete silence. The realization that they had everything and threw it away like it meant nothing. Now they sit in rooms that used to feel full and feel the weight of your absence like a scream they can't silence. And the worst part, they know it's their fault. They know they pushed you to this point. They know they dug their own grave with every lie, every game, every moment they thought you'd never walk away. But you did, and you never looked back. You don't need to haunt them. They're already haunted by memory, by guilt, by the version of you that no longer exists. They'll never hear your voice again. Not the real one. Not the one that loved them through pain, through betrayal, through the breaking. That voice is gone. That light is gone. You are gone. And the silence left behind, it's not empty. It's full of everything they lost. The loudest scream is silence, especially when they know they caused it. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to them, not to the world, not even to yourself. Because the war is over. And you won. Not with explosions, not with revenge, not with rage. You won by becoming, by outlasting, by walking through hell and coming out untouched by the fire. You're not angry anymore. You're not trying to make them see what they lost. You're not crafting speeches in your head, not writing messages you'll never send. That version of you, the one who needed closure, you buried them in silence. Now your power doesn't come from how loud you speak. It comes from how quiet you've become. You're no longer moved by doubt. You don't question if you were enough. You know you were. They just weren't ready for it. Weren't worthy of it. Weren't built to hold it. And that's not your burden to carry anymore. You used to think you had to show them, prove to them that you were something, that your love meant something, that your loyalty should have been valued. But now you understand something deeper. Truth doesn't need to prove itself. It just exists. And so do you. Unbothered, unreachable, untouchable. You don't need their apologies. You don't want their recognition. You don't crave their remorse. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who get revenge. They're the ones who no longer care if revenge happens at all. Not because they've forgiven, but because they've outgrown the entire situation. You've become the ghost in their guilt, the shadow in their mind that won't leave, no matter how many people they distract themselves with. You exist now in their silence, in the songs they can't listen to anymore, in the photos they avoid looking at, in the places they don't go. You're not around, but you're everywhere, because you were real, and they weren't. You gave them everything, your time, your care, your heart. They threw it away like it was replaceable, like you were replaceable. But people don't forget rare things, and you were rare. So now, they live with that weight. That permanent echo, that hole they can't fill. They try to drown it with noise. New people, new distractions, new lies. But nothing fits the shape you left behind. And that's the most poetic ending of all. You didn't destroy them. They did that to themselves. And you didn't just survive. You transcended. You don't walk with pain anymore. You walk with presence, with peace. Not the soft kind, not the smiling, forgiving kind, but the kind that makes people uncomfortable because it's free. Peace that says, I'm not angry, I just don't need you. Peace that looks them in the eyes and says, you lost me. You'll never get me back. You don't post about your growth. You are the growth. You don't tell people you've changed. They feel it in your silence. You don't seek attention. You carry gravity. Still, quiet, heavy. There's no need to perform anymore. No need to explain. No need to fight for a place in rooms that couldn't see your worth. You are the room now, and not everyone gets in. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them try to twist the story to comfort themselves. It doesn't matter anymore, because you've moved past the need to be understood. Now you just are. And who you are now isn't someone they can touch. Isn't someone they'll ever know again. And that truth will haunt them longer than your presence ever could. You're not waiting on karma. You've become it. Not in rage, not in destruction, but in the calmness that says, I survived, I'm whole, I'm gone. They will look for you in every person who comes after. They will hope for a piece of what they had with you. But nothing will taste the same. Nothing will feel as deep. Nothing will carry the fire you once gave so freely. And every night, when the world goes quiet, they'll feel the silence again. Not yours, theirs. Because that's what they're left with now. A quiet that never ends. A peace they'll never reach. A version of you that only exists in memory. don't need to prove anything anymore. You were always enough. They just weren't built to hold you. Now, they never will. You were silent. Now they'll never hear peace again. They watched you bleed in silence. They thought your quiet was surrender, that your stillness meant weakness, that your absence meant defeat. But they were wrong, so very wrong, because silence was the weapon. It always was. And now, they're starting to feel it. They thought they hurt you. They thought they left a scar. But what they really did was carve out the space you needed to become this. Cold, sharp, unshakable. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You didn't try to make them understand. You just stepped back and disappeared into the silence. And while they laughed, you learned. While they lied, you trained. While they played games, you studied the rules and then rewrote them. They never saw it coming because they were too loud, too arrogant, too certain that the quiet one would stay quiet forever. But silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. Silence means everything is happening, out of sight, beyond reach. And now, you are the result, not broken, not healing, reborn. You are the final product of every betrayal, every ignored cry, every sleepless night spent staring into darkness, wondering if it would ever make sense. Now it does, because every unanswered call, every door slammed in your face, every person who saw your pain and chose to walk away, they all served a purpose. They pushed you into the one place they thought would destroy you, but it didn't. It saved you. Silence became your home, your sanctuary, your laboratory. You rebuilt yourself there, piece by piece, thought by thought, layer by layer. Now your silence doesn't just speak, it screams, not in sound, but in power, because it carries everything you survived, everything you learned, everything you are now. They want access again. They want to hear your voice. They want to feel your warmth. But what they get is silence. Not because you hate them, not because you want revenge, but because they don't belong here anymore. They don't get to witness who you've become. They don't get to touch the fire they once tried to extinguish. They don't get to stand in the presence of someone they buried and never thought would rise. But you rose, not loud, not messy, not seeking applause. You rose in silence, and that silence was always the final weapon. You didn't just survive them. You outlived their relevance. You outgrew their reach. Now they live in the ruins of what they broke, the silence they created, the version of you they killed, and the one they can never touch again. They broke you once. You healed in silence. Now they live in the ruins of what they did. Now it's your turn. If you've ever sat in silence, if you've ever been broken, abandoned, or betrayed, drop your story in the comments. Let it out. Let them feel what they tried to erase. Because this space isn't for the loud ones. It's for the quiet warriors, like you. If this reminded you of your own fire, like the video, and if you're done proving yourself, if you're done waiting for the world to understand you, subscribe. Not for motivation, not for healing, but for war. for silence, for transformation. This isn't hope, this is fire. And you were born to rise from it.